These are all journal entries. These are my journal entries. These aren't to teach you guys anything because I'm still learning myself. This is everything that I know, everything that I've learned over my 9 to 10 months so far doing, stocks and investing and so on. I would like to someday, some way, have a career in this, right? Whether that be through school somehow. I do someday want to have a career in this, maybe financial advising or whatever that be. So I want to start off by saying on the day of the 21st, Friday, SPY dropped, right? We all know this. SPY from 611 down to I think the lowest of oh, it's right there, 599.47. So why did SPY drop, right? Kind of want to move this down a little bit. So why? What could have gave you that information? So stuff like weak economic data, consumer sentiment, policy and tariffs, a shift towards safer assets, and the treasury yield decline and demand in bonds. So treasury yield decline, demand in bonds. We've seen this. I think even from the start of December, we started to see uh, this. We started to see this take action. We started to see treasury yield decline and demand in bonds. It wasn't really it was just sort of like an indicator at the time, right? Policy and tariffs that we did see. So we saw a spike up on the day of inauguration. We saw, I think just like it happened last time, where we saw a small increase in price, maybe 5%, 8%, somewhere around there. And then we saw, and this was back in 2016, last time Trump took office, we saw it go from 5% to a 10% decline right after. So maybe we're seeing a trend there. So we're seeing policy and tariffs uh, kind of cause consumer sentiment to pump and dump the market. You know, we've seen it. 610 to 600 has been a big psychological area for SPY. Hasn't been able to hasn't been able to get over that barrier, which is kind of what we saw on the 21st of on the 21st of what, February. So that's what we saw. Weak economic data, policy and tariffs, consumer sentiment, shift towards safer assets. So on this day, what showed strength on this day where the overall market was red? So I know it's easy to think that the whole market just dumped on this day. This for myself, just notes for myself. So I know it's easier for me to believe that everything just dumped on that day, but that's not the case. Not everything dumped, right? We did see XLP show relatively strong strength for the day. I wouldn't even say it was just like small amounts of strength. It was relatively strong for the day, right? We take a look, ADM, HRL, PP, Pepsi, PG, Protector and Gamble, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 1.92%, 1.82. So it was strong, strong sector. And the overall sector, um, maybe one, two, three, four, five, six out of who knows, maybe like 30 stocks, saw a small decline. Costco wholesale, everything saw strength, right? Everything saw strength. Why was this, right? Why was there strength? Why did XLP overall as a sector show strength where everything else declined? So this is because XLP is a defensive sector, probably one of the most defensive sectors. Uh, Probably the most offensive sector. This is why something like XLP saw strength on the this day because banks, hedge funds, everybody was piling their assets, their money, the money that they're controlling for, customers. This is where they were piling up their money, right? They targeting low volatility, targeting safe assets, targeting growth, value, stuff that is needed no matter the situation, no matter what the economic data says, no matter what policy and tariffs say, no matter what interest rates say, people still need to buy food every day. So this is where the banks were putting their money in on this day where everything else just crashed. So on the morning of market open, what did I notice? So I didn't really pay attention to any of this on the day of, right? I took sort of a broad approach, but these are just my notes that I took right after. I'll go over my position on the day of my loss. It was a loss on the day, so I'll go over that, what my thought process was behind it. This is just what the notes that I took later that day so that I wasn't just left wondering what happened. I wasn't just blaming the markets. I sort of wanted to figure out what it is that happened. And I wanted live data, sort of, I guess, maybe forward testing so I could see what everything was saying, why I missed it, and what I could do next time to position myself correctly. So, on the morning of market open, what did I notice? I noticed that XLV, XLRE, XLP, XLU, all sort of somewhat defensive sectors, right? Healthcare, real estate, utilities, consumer, all of them in the green, leading. Stuff like XLF, that's financial sector, that's banks. Um, what else? There's XLK starting to weaken. Even XLE starting to weaken a bit. XLI, everything was XOC over here improving slightly, but not quite there. Uh, all of these more sensitive sectors were affected by everything that we see over here, right? These sectors that saw a decline were more sensitive to all of these either policy, news, sentiment. It's more sensitive, right? Where stuff like this is less sensitive, but it's not. We still saw stuff like XLV, XLRE, XLU show signs of weakness on this day. XLP being the only one, I think, who really showed any strength on the day. That's because XLP is the most defensive, even over XLRE, XLV, XLU, XLE, which could also be considered maybe, defensive sectors, but I guess in their time, in their moment, they'll have their moment, but definitely not where interest rates, the cost of borrowing is uh is uh is growing, and so everything over here, sensitive tariffs, policy, interest rates, borrowing, all of this was affected. Banks, right? Uh let's see, market open, what did I notice? What information was there the day before? We did see banks starting to decline, right? What do we know about banks when we know what I've been taught, right? Is that when we start to see a decline in banks, that's when we could start to see a decline in the overall market, right? Maybe you could call it a top um, when the financial sector starts to take a hit, right? Um, of course, stuff like XLY, XLK being up here really is surprising to me because um, this was definitely a trap within itself, being XLK, technology sector, being up at the way top. If I were to see XLF down here and weakening and XLK up here, I would probably look to take the short just because when XLF is starting to weaken, banks are starting to weaken, we're in the position that we are in on that day. It's not really the time to be taking a position on growth and momentum sectors, right? So I did know this going on into the week. I did play defensive sectors the whole week, but somewhat defensive sectors. I played XLE. I played energy. So I played the energy sector. I played stuff like XOM, Exxon Mobil, Chevron. I did play these stocks. It was sort of like by the dip. I knew where we were. I knew to play it more into defensives, but my uh, even on the day of, on Friday the 21st, stuff like actually saw a major dip, right? So, while defensive within itself, it is not the defensive that you want to play when we're in this kind of economy, right? So that kind of brings it over to when to invest and how to approach. Um, Something I want to remind myself is that each sector has their times uh, when you want to invest in them. So something like XLE, right? To say XLE, for example, why wouldn't XLE be something that you want to invest in right now at offensive when we have all of this information here? Uh, because it's still somewhat relatively sensitive to all of this, where something like XLP might not be, right? This is all value, it's slow momentum, it's a safe asset. They're just safe, it's safe, right? This is the most defensive. So when we have something like this going on, this XLP is where we want to locate all our money. Whereas something like XLE might be more defensive in a situation like, okay, maybe we're who knows, maybe some sort of terrorist attack targeted our gas and oil, and the overall market takes a hit, and we start to see a decline in every single sector, where somewhere where we might want to position our money for somewhere where we might want to position our money for this impact on the market would be XLE, where the prices of gas and oil might start to increase. So every sector has their moment in time. Something like XOC, right, which is now that I got to it, is where I took a position on Friday. I took a position in XLC, but the problem is that you you normally want to take a position on XLC when you start to see a slow decline, a stagnant decline in the market, and stuff like tech growth and momentum, but not shit in the bed kind of like decline, right? You want to just see a small decline, not just everything going to just absolute, just it's just going bad, right? It's not when you want to position yourself into something like XLC. XLC is more like XLC is a defensive. I guess you could call it a defensive, but that's when it's like more growth is still the overall outlook, but it's stagnation, right? So you want to position yourself into something like this is stocks like Meta, this is stock like Facebook, this stuff like Verizon, AT&T. This is where you want to position yourself into these stocks because they're a little less sensitive to the stagnant market, right? But this means that we're still in a growth or overall bullish momentum sort of outlook. The market sentiment is sort of still good, but you want to position yourself into technology that's more, I guess you could say it's like more of a necessity. It's kind of like monopoly based where people need these things, right? This technology. But when you have stuff like borrowing costs increasing, you don't want to take a position on any of these stocks because I mean, when stuff like Meta, which is something I took a position on. When you have Meta and you have the cost of borrowing starting to increase. You're not. What's the first thing that's gonna go, right? You start to begin like, what's gonna go first? Your marketing, your ads. Uh, Maybe you cut back on that. So you're going to see a decline, right? You're going to see a decline in these sectors. So it's kind of my mistake here, not really realizing the the not realizing the not realizing the I guess where it would lie on the defensive just scale, right? It's not the most offensive. It's not where you want to position yourself at this time. So stuff that I missed that could have really given me like a better outlook. Um, we did see a CPI showed the food category was up 2.5% year over year. I didn't even realize that CPI came out this week, right? So that just kind of gives you an idea of how un just kind of like the approach that I took to the day. I wasn't prepared. Uh, I do sort of watch every sector, watch for strengths, and um, I did think of XOC as a defensive, but after this last Friday where it took a loss, I figured out and I dug around and came to the conclusion that, maybe XOC wasn't the smartest decision on the day. Um, we can see here that large cap value was the strongest on that day. So wasn't wasn't small cap value, it wasn't growth, large cap growth, wasn't mid cap growth, wasn't small cap growth, but large cap value, right? Stuff that is already solidified in its sector, value over growth, over momentum, over small caps with low volatility and a high dividend yield. So this means again, it's kind of reassures and tells us what we need to know, right? Large cap value on a day like this, when the market looks like this, where is the money being moved into? It's large cap value, stuff that is already solidified, stuff that already has it's something solid, right? Of course, you don't want to put yourself into some small cap, especially on a day like this, right? You don't want to look for small cap. You don't want to look for volatile markets. You want to look for something that's grounded, low volatile, low volatility, and high dividend yield. Um, this was a VIX around 10 o'clock. Right, we did see a spike in the VIX. Market sentiment, of course, was in the fearish area. So, yeah, it's kind of the day of. I could pull up Weevil and just show. I kind of want to go over why I took a position on Meta, right? So, I took I took more of a fundamental approach on a day where market sentiment was stronger. Something I also want to go over. Market sentiment overrode fundamentals on this day, right? So that comes back to when to invest and how to approach. So you have fundamental where PE ratios, or you have stuff where like a stuff can be overvalued. Um, stuff like stuff just like option the option market and how that might affect the overall stock, uh, how it might over how it might affect the overall stock, right? So I took a position on Meta because I want to come over here. I'll take a look. Took a position on Meta because of the. Okay, I don't think I have the RIG chart, but I can pull that up for us. So when I pull that up, Um, Something like Meta I chose because of the fundamentals of Meta, but not realizing that the overall sentiment of Meta of the market was in a fear sort of in a fear mindset, right? So that really overrode the fundamentals that I sort of I took, right? So that's something that I can work on too, sort of figure out the market, figure out where we are, what sort of investing are we taking at the time, what sort of investment approach should I take, whether that's fundamentals, whether that's I don't really take a technical analysis approach, but I do like to play a little bit of technicals into it. Sometimes I do notice that technicals on their own work really well. Um, Sometimes fundamentals, sometimes like more of like a seasonal approach or just market sentiment, right? For example, sometimes like the time of 2000 when tech stocks were just booming, stuff like fundamentals, overvalue, overpriced, all of that was just thrown out the window. You could have bought at an overpriced value and you still could have made money on it for a long time because, right, it was just a booming sector. And so again, that's just like it's just figuring out what approach to take on investing and when to take it. So my approach of fundamental on a day where market sentiment overrode everything was incorrect. So that's something I could learn and take from it as well. Um, so that's kind of where I looked towards. I looked at the open interest for Meta. You guys want to take a look here? We'll take a look here at Meta, right? Now, the problem was that I took a small look, like a sort of small outlook on Meta. Um, we're in a put imbalance, right? Far put imbalance for the on a smaller time frame. But if we were to look at a larger time frame, we notice that we're still of a sign in a somewhat call imbalance, right? A lot of calls, a lot of people in the money, a lot of calls. Sorry, no, you have a lot of people betting on the upside, right? Too many. Market makers need to position themselves to cause a little bit of pain. They need to bring the market, down, shake a lot of people out, every way. So that's what they're doing. That's why the market's coming down. My outlook on a smaller time frame just wasn't really backed up by enough research to sort of take this position. So uh still took it anyways. SOC at the moment I thought was defensive enough, not defensive enough. So that's where I went wrong. So that's just kind of my outlook on the day. So I think Meta is at like a decent position to start to look to take a position somewhere down here, right? I think it'd be good. If we were to look at it on a daily chart frame. We do see we do see this big spike here. I don't know why I thought maybe taking a position, but again, this is my lack of preparation on the day of, and which caused for the loss on the day. So that's fine. It happens. Um, just trying to maybe figure out how I can work on that. forward testing, back testing, and all of that stuff. So this line here, so you could say we might be overvalued a little bit. Yeah, still got a long ways to go. If it were to maybe bounce off this area, we do see it bounce off, touch this area quite a few times. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, right? So probably not the time. I don't really like just solely base my approach off of just this, right? Who knows? It could bounce off of this area here, 679. Maybe see a small increase before coming back down, but be setting a new trend line. Again, this is just a very basic, formal approach to understanding the market. It isn't just one trend line set in stone, and then that's kind of like my investment strategy, not at all, but it's just somewhere to start, right? So again, that was the my overall strategy on the day of Friday.